I made and destroyed abstract art in dominoes. What's up, Domino community? And today I am excited to share with you my entire creative process that went into creating this huge abstract art domino project. From the idea phase to building and toppling, I will show you everything, including some additional camera angles and a full one-take version of the topple. The inspiration for this project came from the fact that I wanted to challenge myself and see what I could make in 1 week or less, and kind of just make it a free-form pattern that unleashes my creativity. I'm really liking the idea of giving myself a constraint for a domino project and using that to inspire a whole concept. So for this project, the main guideline that I wanted to follow was to only use domino lines. So that meant no walls, no structures, no fancy tricks, just domino lines, and occasionally I will use the tape trick. Before I get into explaining how this project was actually designed, I need to take you back to a drawing that I made in 2015. So if you look closely at this drawing, you'll see a genie lamp, but it's hidden within all of these different gradations and sections of patterns. And this is made by first drawing an image and then sort of like scribbling over it with random lines and curves and loops, and then filling it in with a different pattern or color. I started with a lot of line patterns, so you'll see the first section is kind of a field starter, but instead of having a straight line, it goes and does like a little U-turn, but it gets larger as it goes out. The next orange section is a domino split that goes from 1 to 2 to 4 and then back down to 1. And the split pattern is a little different on each end of it, which is interesting. The third section is a bunch of straight lines that fall in a pattern, but they slowly go out on a curve. Originally, I was going to make each section the same, like every section would be a field of lines, but then I was like, there are so many different ways I could turn the dominoes or split it off and have something topple at the same time that can make it even more interesting. So as I was building, my second criteria was that each section needed to have a different way of toppling. And that way, every section sort of seems distinct. So I had a bunch of spirals made in green dominoes, and they each get a little bit larger as it goes towards the end. Next, we have some blue domino split-offs, and these slowly get a little bit larger as the domino line travels past it. I like the idea of having the splits curve back. It kind of gives it like a rib cage pattern in a way, and makes a really neat effect when it topples over. The next section uses straight domino lines, but it keeps splitting off on one side, so it kind of makes this cool like shell effect. I don't know how to describe it, but it kind of just slowly branches off and becomes more intense in its toppling. And then we have a section that is sort of split in half. So first one side of the pink dominoes fall, and then the second half falls. And these are made off of split-offs, but they fall in opposite directions of each other. And that can be kind of deceiving from the overhead view, because you might think, oh, like everything else that we saw all fall in one piece. But from this, it's two distinct sections. The next section is sort of a wavy field, and I like this one because it splits off, but then it goes back into a single line and then goes back into double lines and then a single line again in the middle. And I find that's a really interesting way to fill the space. It's sort of like an unconventional thing, like I could have just broken it up into 4 or 3 lines, but by having it come back together and then split apart and then come back together again, just adds some more unique like organicness to it. And then to add some more variation, I wanted to have a much slower trick. So this one was inspired by a double spiral that goes in and then goes back out. Unfortunately, I didn't really have enough space to make it more of a full spiral, so it kind of just looks like a line, but I think that'll add some nice variation with the timing of how things fall. And you'll see throughout this project, I've decided to use color changing dominoes to separate all of the sections. And that kind of just makes the illusion that it's like tracing out each of the sections. This next section uses curved domino lines, but you'll see because it's on a corner, you'll see that part of it starts on one side, and then one line at the very bottom snakes back up and continues with the side that it's falling on the opposite side. And I like the idea that there can be one line that continues the path going from one to the next, and then the other lines come from the opposite side in a different direction, but it's still all connected. And then I wanted to really experiment with split-offs. So this was just free-forming various types of domino curves and seeing where I could fill as much space as possible without, having really risky domino lines too close to each other. And I did tape a couple of dominoes down on a one-way tape hinge so that if a domino line did fall, it wouldn't slide out and hit a domino next to it. Luckily, because I am using H5 Domino Creations, these dominoes have extra surface texture, so it's not going to slide a lot to begin with. And that was really nice, just knowing that I can build these dominoes super close to another domino line and know that it's not really going to interfere with it. And for making dense projects like this especially, H5 Domino Creations was super helpful for that. If anyone's interested in buying dominoes, I'll put a link down below in the description. Our next section combines a couple of different tricks. It splits off into a small spiral and then uses the tape trick and goes back. But it's sort of symmetrical. Like this one was built in a way that it goes on the outside and slowly goes to the inside and then goes back out again. I really like that effect. In the next section, I made a net field, and this is basically using a technique where you kind of make diamonds that are all connected and it looks like a net. Yeah, I wanted to play around with more geometric patterns and kind of contrast that with the more free-flowing organic ones. So this is my way of giving it some more structure and putting a very nice grid in the middle of the whole project. Next, we have a trick with domino lines that go in and then they switch back and then split into two. I love when multiple lines fall at once and switch back. It just makes a really cool it's switching direction really quickly effect. And it kind of catches you off guard, and having it split off into two just kind of elevates the effect even more at the end. This next section has a very interesting toppling pattern. We have domino lines that split in two, but the dominoes that split fall inside of a curve. So there's sort of this danger that the curve could get knocked out early by this line coming towards it. But I think it's a kind of cool effect to fill up a lot of space by having two lines fall at once. This next section is a combination of spirals and split-offs. And I found that having split-offs come off of a spiral is a super great way to fill space and also sort of hold the spiral in place so that it doesn't knock down other things around it. By having a branch off go around the whole spiral again, it kind of encloses the inside of the spiral and makes the spiral appear bigger, even though that branch off technically isn't really part of the spiral. Next, we have another sort of geometric pattern using straight lines, and this one relies heavily on the tape trick. So it splits off on a corner at the same time and uses symmetry to make a really cool effect where it'll go through the middle and then switch directions again and then topple the lines inside of it. There's something about symmetry in dominoes that is just really appealing. This next green section was also inspired by combining the spirals and the curves, but this time I wanted to make a little bit of a larger spiral and just see how that would fit in the space. This one was a little bit smaller than most of them, but I think it still came out pretty good. This next section I think is my favorite. It splits off and we have two outside border lines, and then on the inside there's a line connecting the two lines on the outside. Now the original idea for this was to have lines just kind of diagonal back and forth on each side, but then I realized I can just connect the entire inside line so it looks like a squiggle line. And the toppling pattern when this falls is super cool. Now, the next section focuses a lot more on spirals. And I think this is the combination of the green spiral section and the red spiral section, but this one has a more even distribution of spirals and splits. They're all roughly around the same size, and it also makes a very cool effect. And then finally, for our finish, we have a line that splits and then splits again and splits again into these multiple lines that end with a double line. And I thought for the finish, it would be really nice to have just one large swooping effect. So that's why we see the lines split off and slowly come into more lines at the end. Overall, I'm super happy with how this project came out. I love how it kind of balances geometric patterns with more organic, wavy patterns, and each section is very unique. No section is like another section. Each one, even though it's using the same domino line trick, has a different way of toppling, and I think that's super cool. Another thing to point out is you might notice that the outside border uses black to white dominoes instead of white to black dominoes, which are on the inside, and that's pretty much just because I kind of ran out of dominoes, so I needed a way to save dominoes, and I actually kind of like how that came out too. Sometimes art is just inspired by the materials you have, and that can lead to more creative possibilities. So in total, I worked on this project for 14 hours spread over 6 days, and I estimate there are 7,500 dominoes. So now that you've heard how I planned and built the whole setup, let's watch it topple one more time, but from a single overhead camera view. Now that was a perfect topple. I am so thrilled with how this came out. I'm really curious, which one of these 21 sections was your favorite and why? That's the important piece. So definitely leave a comment down below, and it kind of just shows, like, if you have a simple domino line, it doesn't have to be simple. Simple doesn't mean boring. There's a lot you can do with just one type of trick. The possibilities are really endless. Also, I'm starting to post brand new content every day over on TikTok, so if you haven't followed me at Hevish5, definitely check it out. I also want to shout out a comment from Anthony W5261. I so appreciate that you're enjoying these voiceover videos and the behind the scenes, so thank you, and as always, I'm Lily Hevish, and keep on building.